Planning Commission session, whatever. Clerk, would you please?
Mayor Kennedy,
Here.
Commissioner Nelson,
Here.
Commissioner Sean Story,
Here.
Mayor Cohen is excused, Commissioner Atwood,
Here.
Alderman Bailey,
Here.
Commissioner Tracy Story, here, and Commissioner Seligman.
Here.
We have the minutes of our last meeting that were included in the packet that was emailed out to us last week. Any corrections to the minutes or any discussion on them? Can I have a motion to adopt, please?
Moved.
Moved by Commissioner Nelson,
Seconded.
seconded by Commissioner Sean Story. All those in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted. We have 3 items of new business this evening. The first is discussion and consideration of a business use approval for T-Mobile to occupy a retail storefront at, the agenda says 5330, but all the information in the packets is 5530. So it's 5530 Northport Washington Road. It's a B1B Business and Commercial District zoning. And I will turn it over to Mr. Fellows for his recommendation to us, please.
Yes, thank you very much.
Your microphone is not on.
There we go.
Perfect.
So this particular application is for a business use approval at 5530 Northport Washington Road. This is for a T-Mobile. They are planning to open up a second store across from their existing store. It's about a 6,000 square foot building. They'll use about 2,800 for storefront. They intend to have about 10 employees, 2 to 4 working at any particular time, with the hours of 10 to 8 Monday through Saturday, 11 to 6 on Sundays. It's essentially very similar to what is across the street. I do not see anyone online or in the room for any questions, but if you have questions, I will attempt to answer them.
I guess I'm going to ask the question I would have asked of them, and hopefully you have the answer. Why 2 stores across the street from each other? I can see moving a store, but why 2 stores literally across the street?
I asked the same question and they confirmed that they were going to have 2 stores and that's all they mentioned. So the only thing I could think of is with regard to traffic flow, I don't know if it's that they feel that they can make just as many sales with people going southbound and northbound just because it's so difficult to turn around on Port Road, and they actually think they'll make more money. I'm not really quite sure. They weren't very clear on that. I mean, I know sometimes you'll see that at large freeway interchanges. You might see 2 similar gas stations or something if it's a complicated intersection, but this one's the first one for me on a commercial corridor.
Oh, Commissioner Story.
In the attachment in the email that they sent, they do say that they will be relocating to this new location after the first of the year.
Oh,
So
I did not catch that.
which is it, are they having 2 across from each other or are they relocating?
That was not what was really clear to me. And there's an email that said they were going to open up a second store. So
Okay.
I don't, it may be that they're going to have 2 for a period of time until one lease ends and the other one takes, it might be one of those type phases, but they were very vague.
Commissioner Nelson?
That was my question.
Okay, Commissioner Seligman.
Commissioner Story.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right. So your recommendation though is approval of the new.
Yes, I mean, it would be nice to have more diversity on the street of different retailers, but having the same retailer in 2 stores without vacancies is better than vacancies. So,
Right. This is adjacent to Board Game Barrister, right? Is that where they're moving to?
they're moving into the space that Board Game Barrister was. Board Game Barrister has moved to Bayshore Mall.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So there's still one vacancy. You may recall that the middle tenant you saw maybe 3 or 4 months ago was supposed to be a takeout BW3s. They went through planning commission, submitted plans for building permits, and then within a week pulled everything and said they decided to not move forward with that kind of prototype. So
I think that little strip only has 2 stores in it.
three, there's a nail salon, the middle spot, and then where Board Game Barrister was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think at one point there was only 2, and then at some point, I think one got split.
I should pay more attention. Apparently,
Well, it's always good to watch traffic too.
yes. All right, any other comments or questions from members of the commission? All right, well, we do have a staff recommendation. Staff recommendation is to grant the business use approval for T-Mobile to operate the retail store at 5330 North Port Washington Road. Can I get a motion to that effect, please? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is it possible for us to clarify as we make this, like with the clarification that either they're gonna be 2 stores or they're gonna relocate after the first of the year? I'm just confused about that still.
I mean, it does say relocated over after the first of the year, so I would guess, I'm gonna go with what the letter says versus what I had in an email, so we'll go with what's of the document that they're relocating. So with that, I would say there'll probably be some crossover for a few months, depending on how long it takes them to do the build up. They do have the plans submitted to the building department, so they're waiting to begin construction on the space as soon as they receive your approval. So if it's just a simple build out, painting, some shelving and things like that, I would bet they would have that done in 3-4 weeks. Usually.
Thank you. Commissioner Seligman?
My suggestion. All right, my suggestion would be that we proceed and that we ask the staff to get a clarification and insert the clarification in the minutes.
Perfect.
Okay. So there's can I get a motion then to proceed and ask staff to clarify? To follow up with us in clarification, but we would still go ahead and move forward with the approval. Can I get a motion to that regard? Yeah,
So moved.
okay, thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Bailey. All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, and then the next 2 items are both similar items. We'll take them in order, but I think these both have to do with the Plan Commission receiving fence requests. And I thought that anything residential went to the Architectural Review Board, but we did get clarification from our Director of Planning. So if you could walk us through both of these, and then, because I think that they're very similar reasonings for both, and then we can consider both of them. And I don't know if there's anybody here representing the property owners. Well, I'd certainly invite you to have an opportunity to speak as well. So can you walk us through?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So, as a bit of a background, so in Glendale, in simplistic terms, we allow a 6-foot fence. There is a subparagraph within the zoning ordinance that basically states that when there is a subdivision with deed restrictions, that the deed restrictions with the recorded subdivision, whatever those restrictions might be, are what would dictate what the fence would be. For most of our subdivisions that have deed restrictions, they state that there should be the maximum height is 4 feet, and they typically will have language that says no wire type fencing. And what I've been able to determine, the past precedent has been that 4-foot fences have been approved in these particular subdivisions, and that's sort of been the standard. There are 6-foot fences that I've been able to find in these subdivisions occasionally. In each of the reports, I did attempt to do a survey of each subdivision to find out how many fences I could or couldn't find. I may have missed some looking between houses and things like that, but it was a good effort, I'll guess. But I'll caution that that data someone could refute if they really looked even harder. With regard to that section within fences within subdivisions, there is a paragraph that says that the applicant of such permit in a recorded subdivision shall file the application. And then it continues to say that where there is such deed restrictions, covenant notices shall be given to the subdivision association, architectural review board, those types of things. And it actually states that the planning commission is to take action and consider such deed restrictions. So in the past, staff has acted as that, and if the person wants a 4-foot fence, then the permit is issued for a 4-foot fence. In one of these cases, the permit was applied for, it was issued for a 4-foot fence. However, the contractor didn't read the print on the permit that said 4-foot fence, so they erected a 6-foot fence. And then we became aware that it was a 6-foot fence prior to any call in for inspections. And so essentially for one of the items that you have before you, you have an installed fence with a permit that said 4 feet and is now 6 feet. For the second item this evening, you actually have someone who would like to put up a fence. And they're basically asking ahead of time if they could put a 6-foot fence up rather than the 4-foot fence. And so in conversations with both applicants, we discussed the ordinance and with the statement in there that the Planning Commission shall take action. That's why it's before you rather than the Architectural Review Board or being taken care of by staff. I've had a brief conversation today with the mayor with regard to trying to clean this ordinance up. With the information that we have on our website, the handouts, they all talk about 6-foot fences, but nowhere in those informational packets that are available to the public without going into the code does it say anything about the deed restrictions or 4-foot fences. So it is information that needs to be integrated into all of that public information so people are a little bit more aware. And then I did talk to the mayor about creating a map going through these deed restrictions and creating a map that actually shows each subdivision that's a 4-foot, or if it's just at large 6 feet, so we can have better communication and information to the public. So that will be something we'll be doing in the next few weeks or months to get better clarification so we don't have kind of a communication gap.
Did you indicate that these were subject to the neighborhood associations initially?
Yeah, so what our ordinance states is that, well, they're in the deed restrictions and it says that the neighborhood associations are to regulate them, but then our ordinance actually references the deed restrictions and references that upon application, the city is to notify the subdivision association or their architectural review board, as well as the adjacent owners. So lack of having any information of most of our associations have dissolved. They were originally written to be 20 to 25 years. They dissolved approximately in the 80s and 90s. I don't know of any that are actually active. There could be some. I know of no architectural review boards that are functioning on their own either. So we sent out letters to just every property owner in each subdivision, as well as the adjacent owners. I think we have one neighbor here this evening. So for lack of having an address for those entities, we just sort of blanketed the neighborhood. So
just for informational purposes for members of the commission, when Glendale was built out as a city, if you look in our ordinances, we actually reference 10 neighborhood associations. The only 2 that still are active and functioning are Crestwood and Clovernook. The rest of all pretty much disbanded. And so they used to function almost like homeowners associations for each of the neighborhoods. But like I said, through the years, they've all sort of dissolved except for 2 that basically just plan like, summer events and holiday parties, and that's about it, trick or treating. And so
more of a social type.
Yeah, it's become basically just kind of social stuff for the neighborhood. So these duties and responsibilities, we do need to tighten up the language, but the fact that the language does reference the deed restrictions and that the ultimate body would be the Plan Commission is why we're hearing them. And, we have to follow the ordinances as they were written. And so if they were written with deed restrictions, then it's the Plan Commission's obligation to follow the ordinances. That being said, I would actually like to have a conversation as a Plan Commission and also as a common council about what we'd like to see those ordinances look like. So if we take an action tonight, it could be subject to, we might make some changes at the common council level and we could have folks come back. But so I guess that's kind of where I am with things after our conversation today, John.
I will state of the half, 4 or 5 communities I've worked in over my career, referencing deed restrictions is extremely unusual, and usually municipalities try to keep deed restrictions as a private entity and then have their rules kind of regulate. So this is a kind of an unusual, I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen in other communities, but it is more rare than it is commonplace.
So we do allow for 6-foot fences throughout the city unless they're mandated by a deed restriction.
Correct. And then,
I have a 6-foot fence on my property, but there's no deed restrictions in the Crestwood neighborhood. So
not that I'm aware of, yeah, most of the
Right.
deed restrictions I find are going to be north of Bender / the railroad tracks. Going north is where you find them. And most of all of those deed restrictions are 90% identical. They're just kind of the same language was reused over and over. So your decision this evening is the planning commission shall take into consideration such deed restrictions or covenants as competent evidence that such fence would cause a substantial depreciation in property values of the subject property or abutting properties or properties in such recorded subdivision, and making the finding of fact such evidence, however, is subject to rebuttal. So you're supposed to essentially, per the code, determine if you find that such fences higher than 4 feet in these 2 cases could cause substantial depreciation of property values in the area.
Okay.
So we'll dive into the first one. That is
2440 West Sioux Lane is the first one.
yes. So 44.
I'm actually going to offer what I'm hoping is a good compromise for the neighbors for the time being. We're in the middle of winter. Nothing's going to happen at the moment. I would like to ask to lay this over until our meeting in March and give the Common Council a couple of months to be able to review the ordinance and to make sure that the ordinance is that the ordinance language actually it reflects what's happening currently in the city. Right now, we do allow for 6-foot fences in almost all of the city unless there's a deed restriction. And I think we need to clean up that language. And I think we may find that these homeowners, if we clean up the language, will probably have an ordinance that would allow them to have their permits without even having to go through the plan commission. So, John, would you be comfortable if I ask the commission to lay this over to our March meeting? And that gives us, we're heading up in the holidays. We don't have a second meeting of the Common Council. So
Right.
basically we have January and February to discuss it at the council level, make changes to the ordinances, work with the city attorney, and then we can come back with language that essentially permits the 6-foot fences throughout the city without mentioning deed restrictions. And then these folks can just come to you for their permit. And
Yeah, that if we started the conversation at planning or at city council in January, we'd you could the first Monday's it's second Monday. So it would end up at planning commission. Well, we need to talk about the process of the code amendments because it's so long
this
and
ordinance
complicated.
change doesn't have to come to the plan commission.
It's a text amendment to the zoning
Oh,
code.
it
So
is.
text and map amendments are the same thing. So it's the process where it goes to council, then it goes to planning commission, then there's a hearing, then it's back to council, then there's another hearing. So it's kind of like we're going to end up, we can start it in January. We're going to hit, we'll probably be able to get it in before the bulk of any future fence permits come in. So I'm thinking we're going to be, and I can figure out how to try to tighten as much as I can, but it's probably going to be April-ish rather than March-ish.
Okay.
But I think we can still, I mean, most fence permits are going to come in late April, going into May, June. That's the bulk.
Sure.
The bulk. So I think we could be ahead of the.
You can't do anything till the ground thaws.
And yeah, the
Right.
existing fence is going to be frozen in, and the person who would like to put the fence up, the ground's not frozen now, but within a couple of weeks, it probably will be. So-
Right. So what I'm gonna ask then is can we get a motion first from the plan commission not to enforce because right now you have a I believe you've issued an order that they have to reduce the fence from 6 foot to 4 feet.
We didn't issue any orders. The permit was issued as a 4-foot fence, and then they haven't called in for the inspection. Their permit is good for 18 months. So they have until the end of 18 months to call for that inspection. There's only one inspection required, which is after the fence is installed. How we found out about it was by a complaint. So we contacted them and discussed it, and that's where we are now. So if you were to table it, you wouldn't need any orders to stop anything. We would just table it. It would be sitting out here for a couple of months. And we'd be working on some other things. And probably what would then happen is if the ordinance was changed, we would probably bring these two things back onto a planning commission agenda that you would then need to act upon to kind of close them out, so to speak.
Sure.
And then in the meantime, they would probably apply for something different. And then that would probably be at a staff level, which you wouldn't see. So
Right.
if this does come back, it might be one of those things that it's either could be removed by the applicant, or it would come back and you guys would just take a motion to remove it from the table because it's not pertinent anymore or something like that.
Okay. I do see one of the homeowners wanting to speak. So could you come up to the microphone, please? So you'll need to pull chairs up. I'm sorry, we didn't put chairs up for you, but.
That's all right.
Okay.
I'm not on this. I'm Aaron Karen. I own a business in Glendale. Have a lot of employees. I own several properties. And
You need to speak into the
I'm
microphone.
sorry, I
Yeah.
agree with you 100% with what you're saying about tabling it. But with one exception, that's when it comes to safety. There are situations that people have that are safety, that they would put up a fence even during winter, even when the ground is frozen, when it's a safety issue. And that's the reason why I just think that I'm okay tabling it, but I think if someone has an exception, then we should at least hear it out today.
So we're talking about the second address on the agenda for tonight.
6807 North Bethmar.
So that's
Okay.
my property.
You need to speak into the
I
microphone.
am first on the fence schedule. It was supposed to be installed a few weeks ago. So I do believe they could get it in this year yet without having to table my application.
So the issue we have right now is we are not permitted as a plan commission to offer a variance to what is in the ordinance. If we do anything tonight, we have to say no. Or we have to say you can only do a 4-foot fence. That's all we can give permission to. We have to follow the ordinance. You would have to apply to the Board of Appeals and ask them to give you a variance if we were to vote you down tonight. That's going to take another few weeks before they could do it, but they're likely going to follow the rule as well.
But what if the association approved it?
There isn't an association anymore.
Well, there isn't necessarily association, but if everyone signed off on the 6-foot fence who lives in that, so if every
In
single
my
person signed off
subdivision.
on it, would that be considered a quasi association?
In her particular subdivision, I think there's only 6 or 8 lots. It
There's
was in a-
9 lots and
9 lots,
they
yeah.
all signed off on it.
And it's an addition to, so there's that. I would like to correct the mayor. My interpretation of the ordinance, it basically says the planning commission shall take into consideration such deed restrictions or covenants as competent evidence that such fence would not cause substantial depreciation. So I don't think it's a question of you have to say no if it's higher than 4 feet. I think you have to make a decision if you as a body think that a fence higher than 4 feet could cause substantial depreciation of the value of the property. It could go to the Board of Appeals, but I think that gets a little bit more complicated because they're used to giving variances of things and it would get a little bit more messy.
What you're saying though is there is some discretion written into
I
this.
believe there is some discretion.
Okay.
Staff has recommended not approving higher than 4 feet because the majority of the lots in both subdivisions have no fences. And of the fences that are there, the majority of the fences do appear, I didn't go onto people's property and measure, but from the street, they appear to be generally around 4 feet. So I went more of a conservative approach of, if I'd gone out there and found dozens of fences that were 6 feet, I probably would have gone the other direction in a recommendation because it would have seemed like it was more of a standard thing. So,
Okay,
but I think
Commissioner
you do have
Seligman?
discretion.
I'm looking for a process clarification here as well. You've been talking about variances. And I don't know about the language of what I'm about to say, but I posted about this on Facebook last night and was contacted by a nearby resident who has a 6-foot fence on their property that they got by what she called a waiver. And they have a 6-foot fence because they have special needs children who need to be not able to jump over the fence. So is there a staff level waiver process, or would you be imagining that that family would have gone through this variance process that you discussed?
In my research digging up, so in my surveying of the neighborhoods, looking for fences, I then cross-referenced with each property to determine if anyone had a permit. Some of the fences I think are old enough I couldn't find permits. They're probably in boxes and not in an electronic form. I did come across that particular property. I found a lot of correspondence between the two planners at that time. And there was discussions that it was not appropriate and that it needed to be 4 feet. And it seemed to stretch on for a very long period of time. And then Community Development Director Stubbe determined that an 8-foot fence or 6-foot fence was acceptable because the person had a child with disabilities. And that was noted in the permit.
So that was
Now,
at the
whether-
staff level.
That was at the staff level, but from a code perspective, it doesn't say staff has the ability to waive that. It says planning commission. So yes, in the past that happened, and you could, I could have said, oh, well, this is what's done in the past. I'll just keep doing the same thing, but the code says something else. And so I guess you could argue I'm pushing the envelope of what the actual code says versus what somebody was practicing for a number of years.
Sure. So I'm gonna revert back to your comment then. Is there an emergency reason why you'd need to do it right away? Okay. Are you at liberty to share with us why you need to do it right away? Yeah. Go.
Yeah, I mean, it was all in my packet today, John. I never got a confirmation email from you that you received it. It's for safety and privacy reasons primarily. We see our backyard is totally exposed to green tree. We are the only house in the Brantwood Estates addition. There are 9 total properties, and our house is the only one that you can see into the backyard, the way our house is positioned on the street. All the other houses face directly to green tree with their backyard being in the back, obviously. Mine is on the side where everybody going down and to and from the back path can see right into our yard.
Okay.
I'll pull up the screen here in a
And
minute.
there's just additional private things in there as well.
Sure.
Was that in an email?
I have the drawings for everything. I don't see additional statements. here.
She said it was an email today. Let me see if I can.
Okay, because I
pull
said
up
that
my-
that
I
is not.
sent it around 10:48 a.m.
I didn't read all my emails today, but hold on.
I am seeing the map though with the property. So
Yeah, Jennifer. Okay. So she did send me an email with a PDF. Let me pull it up here. And
you have a concern if he shares that in a public
Can I-
meeting with us?
Oh, not at all. It is
Okay.
15 pages.
Oh, okay. Please don't read us 15 pages.
I found plenty of 6-foot fences over in Brantwood Estates on the other side of Green Tree.
Okay,
There
that's
are-
not the 9-house part that you're in.
There
That's
are-
the
So
other
that's the part I was added to.
one. Right, okay.
So I actually, because we had this conversation, I actually did survey that area too. It does have a higher level of 6-foot fences than her addition or the neighborhood that Sue Lane is in. But it's still majority of that subdivision don't have any fences, and they're sporadic all over. I couldn't quite tell you. A lot of them, the one that I could actually find was the one with the person with the disability. Others I couldn't either find any information on. They're either very old or I couldn't find the permit. So I did spend some time digging around. So the document, she does comment on the privacy component of it. And she mentions Green Tree Road, which her side yard, she has 2 front yards on Green Tree and Beth Mauer from that perspective. And
And it is apparently very much, I mean, from the pictures you posted as well as the diagrams in our packet, it's very much open. So yeah,
she expresses some concerns about her minor child and being able to enjoy the backyard and being exposed to the public on Green Tree and
Right.
delivery trucks and things like that. And she also, we did talk about this particular section of the code that says that the planning commission should consider the restrictions. So if I'm reading fairly quickly here, but I believe she, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm reading it pretty quickly. I think her argument from that particular section of the code is that the homeowner should install or potential homeowner buyer cite the need for a fenced off house to create a private space far from eyes of prying neighbors, ensure children and pets do not run off and wander into the street or neighborhood, protect your lawn or property from wild animals and outlying areas, give the house visual appeal, demarcate your property boundaries, enhance curb appeal, section off parts of your house, block out unsightly sites. Neighborhood trends of the HOA may dictate the need for uniformity as this exists to fence. An unfenced is a largely fenced off neighborhood that would be an eyesore, reducing noise from railroads and traffic. And she
This would
mentioned
definitely be a
swimming
traffic
pools.
issue if they're on Green Tree.
They are on Green Tree,
It's a
yes, the
busier
corner.
street.
It is a busier street.
That was actually a quote from an article I found online,
Okay.
John, that stated how fences do not depreciate the value of your
Sure.
home or neighbor.
My,
I
my,
think one of the biggest points is that all the neighbors in the estate all approve this,
sure.
and we have their signatures.
Except for one family who recently went to Florida because maybe they go there every winter. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then on this, I don't have it on the screen, but she did attach I'll call it a signature page that basically has each property within the subdivision, a map of the subdivision. And I see signatures that were gathered from the 3rd and the 4th with 2336 Green Tree not having that particular signature, but I do see a variety of signatures. I can share it on the screen if maybe that would help you all. Okay, well, there you go. Her neighbors to the west and to the north are not part of her subdivision. They are part of two different subdivisions.
Sure.
She did get waivers from both of them that were in the original packet.
Right. And then the rest of the subdivision essentially what
Is-
would constitute their neighborhood association if they had
It's
one.
all the other 8 houses to the east of her house. She's right there.
Okay. So I mean, if you're saying we have the discretion to make a decision that is different than what is currently written in the ironclad ordinance, and we allow 6-foot fences in all the rest of the city, and you've got sign off of neighbors, I don't see a problem with it. I don't know if other members of the commission do. So Ryan, go ahead. Or
Yeah.
Commissioner Atwood.
Thank you. So I don't know about you, but I'm not really concerned about like economic depreciation of the properties in terms of 6-foot fences. I'd be more concerned, and like just to state, obviously like this is important to you. This is your land, like it's really important that you be able to take care of this from an individual level. So I'm just trying to think from a community standpoint, similar to like if companies will have reduced all their 6-foot cubicles to 4-foot cubicles or 3-foot cubicles in order to like have people engage with each other. And I can see, 6-foot fences becoming more and more of a trend. People get more and bigger dogs, and the things change over time. I'm just wondering if is the 4-foot ordinance in place from a societal point of view, like where we don't want to bring,
Make a
Well,
comment.
I'd also like to hear from Mr. Fellows as well, but yes,
That
please.
4-foot ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's dated from 1959. Is that correct? Our deed restriction where it states,
The
Of course.
deed restrictions are from 1959, and I'm not
So-
aware of any amendments to them.
okay, so a lot has changed since 1959. That's just my point of view.
I would say to answer Mr. Atwood's question, if you read planning literature, communities that have more eyes and ears in their community and on their streets tend to promote all sorts of things from safety to people beautifying their homes, that sort of thing, because they're actually interacting and having the ability to talk over the fence to your neighbor and know who that person is. That sorts of things can actually create more of a community atmosphere. There's a number of studies. There's one actually here from Milwaukee when the city housing department in Milwaukee built these circular buildings that elderly people live in. A lot of those elderly were living in neighborhoods. There's actually a correspondence to taking the elderly out, putting them into those towers, that there are actually more crime in the neighborhoods that they left after they're leaving, because they were the eyes and ears on the street that actually saw what was happening. Now, granted, that goes back many decades, but you can find newer literature too. Similarly, we're not talking about fencing in front yards here, so you still have the eyes and ears from a front perspective. And then there's the safety concerns of children and things like that. Green Tree, it's not the fastest road, but it's not the Green Bay or Good Hope, but it still tends to have people go a little bit faster from that perspective. So I think there is sometimes a need for a fence, and a 6-foot fence probably in a lot of cases, like for instance, if you had a swimming pool, I think more people would feel more comfortable with a privacy fence in your swimming pool. It's a little bit more of a less of a public activity than more of a private activity from that perspective. But there's also ways to, get vegetation and stuff, but that does take years from that perspective too. So there's sort of I guess I'm saying that there's arguments for a 4-foot fence, but there could also be arguments for a 6-foot fence. So,
Yeah.
or in some situations, there may be a yard where a 6-foot fence is warranted on one side, but a 4-foot fence on the other side would be perfectly fine. So there may be kind of unique situations given to a particular lot.
Yeah,
So-
may I ask and clarify, you want to put the 6-foot fence like on all 4 parts of the?
Around the entire backyard, yes, down
Backyard.
both sides and it's backyard, not the front.
Not the front?
No.
Oh,
He had the diagram up here. Can you share your screen again?
Yeah, I'm
Oh, sorry.
I'm looking at this and I guess I'm not a genius at reading this,
Oh,
but
can I completely understand, because my property is also a corner. So technically my backyard is the side yard, and also a street that is quite busy in traffic. So our front is actually a less traveled road. My question to you is, why 6 feet all the way around instead of the 4-foot for this particular property?
One of the reasons also in the list is people don't feel comfortable with intrusion of a neighbor. That was written in there. And even though a 4-foot fence would solve a lot of the fog, it doesn't solve the issue that she works full-time. Her mother is elderly. She used to live out in the country and came to live with her, and she wants a space where she can be outside on her own and feel comfortable, and she's stuck in the house. And she doesn't want people staring at her, and she just doesn't feel safe. She came from Eau Claire, I think, no, Plum City. And she's a little distraught with just not having that privacy. And Jenny has a young child as well, and she just felt like right now that.
How far would the fence be from the green tree?
Well, John pointed out that I would need to move it in a little bit to meet the 30-foot minimum. So along with asking for a variance or permission for a 6-foot fence, I would like to be allowed an additional 4.19 feet is what I figured from our calculations, that I would need to go from the edge of my house instead of bringing it in and run it straight back off the line of my corner of my house that's on Green Tree. Otherwise, I am in from the property line going all the way around.
20-some feet, 26 feet.
John, do you see the measurement in there? It's 25.83 or something.
yes.
trying to
There was
find
a
the
picture. I
that
don't
the
know
mayor
what,
wants.
whether, where you, it's not in our packets. It may have been what you submitted to John today. There was looked like a Google Earth photo where you had a yellow line drawing where the fence would be.
I'll grab it. It might have been in my fence application. Yeah.
It's not in what's been posted here. So I'm wondering if it was what she sent you today.
I have what's on the screen is what she sent me today. And I don't have the yellow map.
What? Oh, that's the other house. That's
That was the
theirs.
other house.
That's theirs. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that's why I can't find it.
That's why you can't find it.
But this is her yard here. This is Green Tree at the bottom of the screen. Beth Mar is to your right. The house is shaded here. So essentially a fence along Green Tree, the back, and then the north side. There'd be gate here and a gate there. It would keep the shed within the fenced in area. And then the deed restrictions talk about a 30-foot distance, and that's her house is about she wants to match up the corner line, and it's about 4.9 feet is about what she said. This would be a is it cedar or pine? Sorry.
Cedar.
A cedar fence with a trim cap and post and a skirt board at the bottom. So a pretty nice looking, cedar fence. You can see something like this in many areas of town.
So, I appreciate your recommendation to us and following the ordinance. I mean, I disagree, I guess, with the recommendation. I feel like we need to clean up the ordinance as a city. And in the meantime, if we're allowing 6-foot fences everywhere else, we should permit both of these fences. Yours at the edge of your house, but no further, which I think would put you a few feet shy of the 30 feet, but we have the discretion to be able to do that. So I don't, would a member of the commission be willing to approve the fence as presented? And which one are you, Beth Mar?
Yes, I'm Beth Mar.
Okay, so would somebody be willing to make a motion to approve the fence at 6807 North Beth Mar, not to exceed 6 feet, and that it would align exactly with the house, which would be a variance from the 30-foot setback?
I don't think she's exactly house, because on the side, there's a,
Right,
Fence
it's
further.
only on the left side of the house that's on the Green Tree side. On the other side, there will be a fence, so it won't go straight back from the side of the house on that side.
Right.
So just the Green Tree side, which that's the only side that I need to be within 30 feet.
The deed restrictions just say 30 feet from the street.
Great. Right.
Again, very interesting ordinance language.
And I think also, I grew up on Green Tree Road, so like 40 years, but Green Tree Road was a tiny little road with ditches. And then when they widened it, I bet you that kind of changed it, why the house is now not 30 feet. I would think.
Property line probably didn't change, but the impression of the road getting closer probably definitely did.
All right, someone want to make a motion?
I'll do it. I think we don't have a sufficient reason to shoot it down, and therefore we should work to expedite it.
So are you making a motion to approve
To
the
approve.
fence?
All I would ask you to do, because the ordinance says that you're supposed to base it on a possibility of depreciation of property value.
Okay.
All I would say is, because that's clause is in there, you're not really approving or disapproving for any other reason. You could just make a finding that you do not find that a fence would be a cause of depreciation.
That's all we need is a motion of that, and then you would go ahead and approve the fence. You don't need us to approve.
You
the
don't need to
fence.
approve the fence. I would just need you guys to determine that you don't find a depreciation of it, and then we
Okay.
would continue to process her permit.
Well, how about if we say this then? Would you be willing to make a motion that says that the proposed fence at 6807 North Beth Mar Lane does not depreciate the value of neighboring properties?
Moved.
Thank you. For a second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tracy Story. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. So now we've just basically given him the permission to order
Go
to
back and change my permit.
go back and change your permit. Yep, you guys can work with him. So now we have the same thing, I guess, with Sioux Lane Road, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so similar situation. They already built their fence and it was built at 6 feet. But the contractor built it at 6 feet, even though it was supposed to be 4. Do we need to hear any additional information, or are we good with going ahead with the motion? All right, you want to make the same motion?
No. I'll say I don't. I'm an extrovert and I like having 4-foot fences, period, because people see each other more.
Right.
And I understand, like, people across the street from me, they're dog people, you know, they love their dogs. They got a nice 6-foot fence and now they don't talk to the neighbors next door to them. And now it's been 6 years and that's like a different feel on our block. But that's not sufficient reason in my mind to, like, you know, prevent the rights of people to do whatever they want on their own lawn, you know, so.
So I guess I have a question. So it was supposed to be 4 feet, was built 6.
So I did all my research and everything, contact city and who I needed to, because the website, as John stated, says residential, everything, 6 foot. We're like, perfect. We have a husky who can easily jump 4 feet. And so that's why we're like, awesome, 4 foot or 6 foot fence will be perfect. When I submit it, we got it back from here. I submitted it right to our contractor and must not have read the first page or something. And he just they erected a 6 foot fence. I was in the process of figuring out how to do the inspection part of it because we just moved here exactly a year ago. And so we're figuring out all this stuff. So deed restrictions and all that are completely foreign language to us.
Sure.
So we were in the process of figuring out how we had to get the permit finalized inspection wise. And that's when John had called me and said, well, we've had a complaint about your fence and now we're here. So we would like to keep it at 6 feet because our dog can easily jump 4 feet. And we want to keep her from being a nuisance and getting out and getting into people's yards and, you know, running after their kids. She's a super friendly dog, but when you see a 60-pound black and white husky coming at you, you kind of freak out. So
John, if we had a motion, same effect, right? A motion deeming that we don't find that it would depreciate the neighboring property's values. Would that be sufficient for you to be able to reissue the permit under a 6 foot? Because right now you issued, so I guess we have a different problem here. They issued a 4 foot permit and a 6 foot permit was built. And so technically he has to enforce a 4 foot permit if they come out to inspect.
So what I would do is we would go into the permit software and I would make a notation, attach the minutes of the planning commission. And then she'd have I'll make notations in it and it will be a 6 foot fence. So
Todd can go out and inspect a 6 foot fence.
he would inspect in a 6 foot fence. Yeah.
Okay.
So she wouldn't have to reapply or pay another fee or anything like that.
Got it. Okay.
It's
Commissioner
a 3-minute process. So
Seligman.
I have a question and a comment. The question is about the fence waiver form where your neighbors have to sign off on the fence. I don't really understand that. And if your neighbors really have a veto on your getting a fence or not. But the question I have about this particular form is, since it's all a PDF, I can't tell whether the picture of the 6 foot tall pine dog ear fence that is part of this packet was also shown to the neighbors who signed off on it.
yes, it was. I printed everything out that we submitted. I printed out as packets for each of our neighbors and they reviewed everything. So they know exactly what it was going to look like before we put it in.
So the abutting neighbors were expecting a 6 foot fence?
Yes, both of our buddy neighbors were.
Okay.
Are we able to know what the complaint was?
complaint was they have a 6 foot fence over at the corner from me and I thought we were only allowed 4 foot fences. So what
It
you
wasn't the neighbors that signed off.
So what you have, it was not one of the neighbors who signed off. So what you have, this is my interpretation from talking to people. Granted, you know, I've only been here, but since March, but dealt with a lot of fences in the last few months. I would say long-term residents who have lived in Glendale, particularly in this particular part of Glendale, they are very familiar with their deed restrictions. And they have commented that they were supposed to be a neighborhood of hedges and shrubs and short little fences, and not a community of tall fences. And what I would say is a lot of newer homeowners are desiring the taller fences. And so I think you have people who have lived there long enough that if they've lived there 30 or 40 years, there's still a memory of deed restrictions and those types of things. And that kind of lives on versus somebody who moves in new, you know, when you go and buy a house, there's a giant stack of paperwork, probably somewhere in there, some deed restrictions possibly, but nobody actually reads them all. They tell you to sign in these various places and you sign and give them a big check and you are all excited to move into your house. So, and you probably, like me, I have a stack probably in a file folder and I've never looked at what all those papers are.
Right.
So I think that's sort of the situation from that perspective. So.
Seligman, go ahead.
With respect to the question of property values, although I'm not enthusiastic about there being 6-foot fences rather than 4-foot fences, this particular property has turned over a lot in the 20 years I've lived in this neighborhood. I don't know what's going on with that house, but I think there have been like 4 or 5 owners in the time that I've lived in the neighborhoods. And I think it would be nice for that house to stabilize. Perhaps putting up this fence is a way of stabilizing the property from an economic standpoint.
I mean, I think the dog alone is a reason enough to allow for the 6-foot fence.
And we also have our young nieces come over quite a bit, so they like to play outside, and without a fence, it just, I feel I'm their aunt, so I'm like, I don't want people to like come off the street for you, but, and
Right.
that's just me.
Answer the other half of Commissioner Seligman's question with regard to the waiver forms. I have received a number of questions about the waiver form. I had one person say, well, what am I waiving? And it's not really a waiver, which is actually true. So the idea is that you're supposed to communicate with your property owner next door that you want to put up a fence, and you're supposed to share the information with them. I have found some people who have called me and said, well, my neighbor came over and asked me to sign this form, but they're not telling me what they want to do. And so you do have some people who don't actually share what the fence is going to look like, that sort of thing. So you have to kind of help everybody through that process. The other part of the ordinance, which I didn't put in the report, there's another section that basically says the city planner, community development director, it has a title in there that basically can consider the waiver. And if somebody says they don't approve the waiver, we're supposed to take that into consideration. But in that instance, for the 6-foot fences, it's up to staff to determine if they believe that there would be a depreciation of property value. That's a really hard, I'll be honest. I think that's a really hard thing for staff to determine, particularly in many neighborhoods. Every other house has a fence and there's no depreciation of property value. So it's a very kind of interesting benchmark to meet. So it would have to be a very undescribable, unusual fence that I could never, ever think of coming in that would give me pause to say that it could cause depreciation. And I can't even quite, most people put up it's either going to be cedar or wood or some sort of PVC. They're pretty traditional in their design. Some might have a little lattice or a little detail, but for the most part, they're all pretty much a fence. So,
And I'll tell you, all the houses on my block, we all have 6-foot fences on the back part of the house.
Yep.
Many of us have dogs. That's why we have 6-foot fences, and our house values keep going up and up and up.
yeah, and you'll find
So-
most neighborhoods that actually have alleys do have fences. When you get to the northern part of town, that's where we see less fences because people have bigger yards. They have lots of space for shrubs and
Sure.
trees and things, but so.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, I think it's a long-term cultural shift, and probably at the time of the ordinance, it was like, you may cause problems like that may be too quick of a shift, but there's lots of people who have dogs and it's just a change. It's not what I do. I live in the corner and I'm like, hey, let the whole world see me. And I know I'm in the minority there.
Or not, because I'm also the
Sorry.
same. So, or if we do put up a fence in our back side yard, we would do a 4-foot, and we have 2 dogs as well, but because I'm of that, even though I've lived here for 6 years, I'm of the mindset of the involving the neighborhood and the neighbors in the community. But I do understand that some people do prefer the 6-foot privacy due to family and pets. So I do understand that.
Depends on the type of, like, I have a puppy, so I'm
Yeah.
training the puppy with a collar right now that basically gives a warning zone. So it's a little whistle and then
Mhm.
it's something else. And so it's giving the dog commands and she's actually learning it. But I don't know if I had a 2 or 3-year-old dog, I could get the dog, like, it's a technology that works with GPS and it so far is working with my dog, but I don't know if you had a mature dog that you'd be able to retrain them to be fenceless.
I may, if, oh, I'm sorry.
Let's go ahead and move forward with
Anyway.
a motion. So, could I get a motion from somebody that the plan a motion that the plan commission does not deem that a 6-foot fence on this particular property would be detrimental to property values of neighboring properties?
Would so move as a real estate professional that this does not diminish the value of a property.
Thank you very much. Nice to have a realtor here. So it's been moved. Has it been seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Sean Story. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Thank you
And
guys
we're-
so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your patience. We do need to clean up our ordinance, and I think there's 2 cases right here that just taught us that, so we'll work with the Director of Planning and get something submitted to the Common Council. It'll get referred back. So we're all going to discuss fences again, guys.
And Mr. Mayor, when the common council discusses that ordinance, can you talk about that neighbor the abutting neighbor waiver?
Yeah.
We will be talking about the waiver.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they'll come back with some proposed language that'll go to the Common Council. The Common Council then is going to refer it to the Plan Commission. It's going to go on our agenda probably in February, and then we're going to call a public hearing in March. So we're going to open it up for the public to come in and weigh in as well. So, but in the meantime, I think we just need to clean up the language. Yeah. All right. Well-
Yeah, I'll let you close out the meeting.
Yeah, so our 2023 meeting dates, you send us out a list. One of the things that we have done, whenever we have had the meeting fall on an election day or on the 4th of July or something, or right around the 4th, we've typically I know you recommended the possibility of Wednesday. We don't necessarily have the Common Council chambers that the city can use it every night. The municipal court uses it. Some other organizations also have standing things that happen in here. But Mondays and Tuesdays are always the cities. Nobody else can schedule anything. So what we've typically done is like April election, November election, we meet on the second Tuesday.
Okay.
So what I would propose is when your calendar, we don't need to approve a list of dates right now.
Yeah, I just need a conversation to make
So
sure we're all on the same page.
January's is January 3rd.
Correct.
Okay, any problems from folks on January 3rd? People, if we're traveling over the holidays, will be back? Okay, so January we're set, but we are going to look at the Jewish holidays, 4th of July, and then
Yeah.
see if we need to move it to the second Tuesday in any of those months.
Yeah, so the Jewish holidays, none of them, I could be wrong. I don't think any of them are high holidays. I think they're more minor, but that's why I wanted to bring attention to anybody that might have been a conflict with.
We've
So
we've looked at Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the first night of Passover.
Sure.
And then likewise, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, right? Basically your standard holidays.
So I don't think we're conflict of any of those.
Okay,
Except the 4th of July. And the reason I recommended trying to keep it the same week, is we could run into situations where, so when it comes to planning commission, for instance, I am able to sometimes take things on Wednesday and get them onto the next city council meeting. If I go a whole nother week, then it pushes somebody's application,
more weeks.
it pushes them 2 more weeks. So that's why I was recommending not going to the following week. We certainly can. Just want to make sure you're aware that, I
So
was
technically,
just trying to be more business friendly, I guess.
So I appreciate that.
for the
Here's
applicant.
the issue, though. By city ordinance, the cutoff for a common council agenda is noon on Wednesday. So
Correct.
if we met on Wednesday night, it wouldn't be on the next agenda anyway. Yeah.
Unless I could still get it to the clerk before noon and
Assuming
assuming it's going to go
Right.
fine.
Yes, Commissioner Nelson.
Is the option to just have it the week before not an option when or if we run into that situation? So
I did suggest that there's some
I saw that.
I think it's March or April. I can't
It
remember
was
off the top of my head,
March.
but I did suggest we could go
March
forward
28th.
one. That would not delay anyone. It would we'd move forward one Tuesday instead of going late one Tuesday.
yeah,
The issue of my concern of doing it before our scheduled date is that at this point, our schedule is pretty much set and a lot of businesses know. And so they know it's the first Tuesday of the month. And that's what the ordinance actually states is the first Tuesday. So if it gets bumped to the second Tuesday, they still got their stuff in on time. But if we move it early, that means we have to move the deadline for turning things in earlier, and we might have businesses come and go, but your ordinance says it's on the first Tuesday and I got my stuff in on time, and they didn't. So yeah, I appreciate the thought though. So yeah, but our ordinance does state like this meeting is the first Tuesday of the month at 6 o'clock in this chamber. And any change to that, we have to basically make a vote to change. So if we wanted to hold a meeting over at the park in the community room, we have to make a motion the month before to move it to the community room. So,
We probably should make it a little more flexible too, because things do come up. If we had,
right.
I don't know, if the building we meet in had a flood or something or damage, we would,
Or we have a
You know,
pandemic.
or we have a pandemic or
But
something.
interestingly enough, my declaration of a citywide emergency allowed us to do all those things without having to vote on it at all. So, we moved our meetings over.
Right.
We moved our meetings virtual. I mean, all that stuff happened with.
All right, well then I'll tighten up the dates, resend them out. You'll get one more chance to comment. If you don't reply, I'll assume you're okay with them. If you do reply, we'll try to adjust and then we'll go forward with those.
During the year we were closed while the city hall was being rebuilt, the city council actually passed a resolution indicating that from a certain date to a certain date, all city meetings that are indicated in city ordinances to be held at City Hall would be held at 2500 West Bender Road at Richard E. Meslowski Park in the community room. That was how we got around the ordinances for a year. So, but yeah, our ordinances are really, as we're learning tonight, our ordinances are really, really, really picky. So sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes.
They're picky in certain areas and then they're vague or not in others, is how I would describe it. It's interesting
Yeah.
what they're picky on.
Okay, so 2023, we'll look at the second Tuesday of the month if we have a conflict. And you'll bring those up the month before so that we can have an item on the agenda to change them. We're fine for January. Any other announcements or anything? All right, so our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, January the 3rd, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Story, so Sean Story. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tracy Story. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned.
Words of Shakespeare.